Hello everybody and welcome to the GCSE English Language and English Literature Revision Evening. My name's Miss Nichols and I'm Head of English here at St Peter's. The aims of today's session is to give you an overview of the English Language and Literature courses and how we deliver these courses at St Peter's, and to give you a good understanding of things you and your child can do to achieve success in these important courses. First, I will talk about English language, then English literature, and then I will explain what skills underpin these courses. I will finish with some steps to success. The examination board we use is Edexcel. In English, students take 2 GCSEs, English language GCSE and English literature GCSE. Now we're going to look at ways of revising English, preparing for the exams. And this is a guide that will hopefully be useful for both students and their parents. English language GCSE. The exam board we use is Edexcel. The subject code for this particular course is 1ENO. And in English language GCSE, there are 2 papers to prepare for. Paper 1 is called Fiction and Imaginative Writing, and it lasts for 1 hour and 45 minutes. As it is described by the title, students will be reading and responding to fiction. At the moment, it's 19th century fiction, so quite old-fashioned stuff. And they will also be writing imaginatively. The imaginative writing section is worth 50% of the whole exam. Therefore, the reading section is also worth 50% of the whole exam. Paper 2 is non-fictional and transactional writing. Therefore, this will be based on texts such as magazine articles, newspaper articles, texts that are actually about real events. Some of it is literary non-fiction, so they may be reading memoirs and things like that. And for this exam, it is 2 hours and 5 minutes. Just like in paper 1, the writing section is also worth 50%. Therefore, for the whole exam, for English language, half of the marks will come from your response to reading and half from your ability to write well. Now, as you know, COVID has changed things slightly, and each of the exam boards has sent out information regarding the English language and English literature papers with regards to COVID. So this is what the subject was told, this is what we've been told about the subject ahead of the exams. I did talk to you just now in the previous slide about the fact that the texts for paper 2 are non-fiction texts. And it's only paper 2 where we've been given advance information. So we know that the texts types that students are going to have to read and respond to are, first of all, an extract from a magazine article from the 20th century, and secondly, an extract from a memoir, so a bit like a literary diary entry from the 21st century. So we know that that's the sort of writing that students need to be aware of, and they need to know how this sort of writing works. It's very useful to be told these things ahead of the time, because it means that we know the sorts of things that we need to be reading and thinking about. In section B, and like I said, section B is worth 50% of the marks. They will have a choice between writing an article or a letter. So it's quite important, actually, that all the students understand some of the conventions of writing an article and a letter. And at least we know now what we need to focus on. So how will this information help your child to prepare for paper 2? First of all, it would be a really good idea, knowing that they've got to respond to a magazine article and a memoir, to read a range of magazine articles and memoirs. So memoirs are basically things like autobiographical writing. So it might be worth picking up a few autobiographies from maybe the library or from your own bookshelves, and just having a look at the ways that people write about their own lives in order to make it interesting for the reader. They should be looking for the techniques the writers use and practice analysing and evaluating these techniques. And they can also think about how the texts compare. I know that the teachers here at St Peter's are already looking for suitable texts from magazine articles and memoirs to present to students when they come back after the half-term break. But it's always good to read as much as possible and to be aware of the techniques that the writers are using. Regarding the writing, I believe it would be a very good idea to decide ahead of the exam what form of writing you're going to actually produce for Part B, and practice writing in that form. So you might think, well, I think I can write really well in a magazine article style. And so practice writing articles. Think about some of the features of the forms of articles. Or if you would prefer to write a letter, then make sure that you know all the things that go into a good letter and practice writing letters. The only thing they haven't told us really is who the audience is and what the purpose of the article or letter are. But it's very useful to have an idea of the form of the writing that you're going to be expected to write, because that means you can really be prepared. So use this information. Everybody else will be. That's what it's all about. That's why you were given it. Now, obviously, there are a lot of skills in English language GCSE which you need to be able to show off when you come to the exam, because English language GCSE is the amalgamation of all of the years of schooling that you've had from the moment you started in reception right until now. Here are the skills and knowledge that you're going to be tested on. So for knowledge, you've got to know about different forms of text. You've got to know how different writers write in particular styles, depending on whether it's fiction and non-fiction, and then the type of fiction and the type of non-fiction texts that the writers are creating. You've also got to learn the language and structure techniques used by writers to create meaning. And that means teachers will be working with you on learning some of the key subject vocabulary, which I will go through in the next slide. Now, regarding skills, you've got to be able to write analytically about the way writers use language, form and structure in texts that you've never read before. So you've got to be able to find things that writers do and be able to comment on the ways the writers do these things. In paper 2, you will be comparing the way that writers convey their ideas. So with the memoir and with the article, you'll be comparing those things. You'll be looking at the different ways and the similarities between the ways that writers convey their ideas when they write for different audiences and purposes and in different forms. You've also got to be able to show that you appreciate the way good writers convey their meanings. You've got to be able to show that you understand what it is that makes a piece of writing good. As well as that, for both of the papers, you're going to be tested on your own writing. You've got to be able to write good fiction and non-fiction texts yourself. You've got to be able to use interesting vocabulary, use different sentence types for effect, and spell, punctuate, and use grammar correctly. So there's a lot to be shown here, but you have been learning this for many, many years now. Now it's your time to show off what you know and what you can do. Now, I did promise you that I'd tell you some of the key subject terms and ideas for the language and structure questions. Now, I know your teachers will have shared these things with you. For structure, you can talk about the whole text, so the way the writing is actually presented from beginning to end. You can talk about the different sections in a text, or how the writer uses paragraphs for effect. Sometimes writers use really short paragraphs just to emphasize something. Sometimes, mostly, writers use paragraphs just to group ideas together. But structure is also about things like flashbacks, when a writer flashes back to something that's happened previously in the text. Or the opposite of that is foreshadowing, when a writer hints at something that's going to happen later. In addition to this, you will need to know about different sentence types. such as simple sentences, compound sentences, and complex sentences. And lists, questions, repetition, rhyme, rhythm, motifs, and discourse markers. Now, structure is all about the nuts and bolts of a text, the way a text is put together, a bit like scaffolding in a house. And of course, you've also got to think about aspects of language. Here are some aspects of language that I'm sure that you will remember and know from previously. Nouns, proper nouns, adjectives, powerful verbs, adverbs, similes, metaphors, personification, alliteration, sibilants, assonance, onomatopoeia, pathetic fallacy, formal and informal language. Now, there are a couple of quite impressive lists. If you turn those into keywords and learn them, you'll soon own them, and then you'll know what to apply when you're doing your English language GCSE. That's what revision's all about. Here are some tips now about how to give yourself an edge in the English language examinations. Number one, of course, is to read widely, as much as you can. Fiction, maybe short stories, and non-fiction. So things like articles and blogs and letters. Now, obviously, your teachers give you home learning tasks each week. Please make sure that you complete all the home learning tasks. This is another opportunity which will be made for you to do good, on-hand, proper revision. Of course, with English language, the world is your revision aid. There's language everywhere around you. Look around you. Keep your eyes open. There's language being used everywhere. Keep your eyes and ears open. You can practice writing in different styles. I've suggested here that you write reviews, stories, and articles, or at least sections of them. As you know, for your paper one, you're going to have to write fiction. So practice writing descriptively. Practice writing short stories. And then for paper two, remember, you're either going to write an article or a letter. And like I said before, decide which one it's going to be and then practice. Make sure that you're taking time to understand the words that you're reading. So if you're reading and you come across a word you're not sure about, look it up and try and learn it, and then maybe use it. If you become aware of words, it's amazing how often when you've learnt a new word, you suddenly hear it being used everywhere. That will open your mind and also make you a better writer. I would also suggest that you listen to examples of good language use. You can hear some really good examples of good language use on Radio 4. And if you want to help with your literature and language too, listen to some of the book review and film review programmes. Listen to the way that professionals speak about books and films and use evaluative language to describe them and respond to them. And of course, there's always things going on here at St. Peter's. So if you hear of a public speaking competition or a debate that's going on, or if you're asked to contribute to the newsletter, get involved. All of those things are ways of using language to a really high level. Now I've finished talking about GCSE English language, and now I'm going to move on to GCSE English literature. Again, the exam board we use is EdXL. This time, the subject code is 1ETON. In GCSE English literature this year, we have Paper 1, Shakespeare and Post-1914 Literature, which is 1 hour and 45 minutes. And Paper 2 is a 19th century novel, and that is 1 hour and 20 minutes long. Because of COVID, for English literature, students will no longer have to revise poetry, as the exam board have allowed us to drop this as a result. In that case, these are the texts that students need to learn and revise really well. Macbeth, An Inspector Calls, and A Christmas Carol. Just like in English language, there are knowledge and skills for GCSE English literature, which I will go over now. So the things students need to know: they need to have knowledge of the plot, character, themes, and aspects of the craft of writing in all of those set texts. Macbeth, An Inspector Calls, and A Christmas Carol. For Macbeth and An Inspector Calls, students also need to have knowledge of the context of those texts. That's things like the social and historical context surrounding the texts, because they have to write about those in the examination. The skills students need to make sure they can show are the following. They need to be able to analyse language, form and structure used by writers to create effects. These are the same skills that are used in the reading section in English language. But this time, students have to write full analytical essays. So they'll be given a question and they need to be able to write a full essay based on the questions that they are given. They need to be able to write critically about whole texts and their presentation of themes and characters. So students really need to know their way around the text. They need to be able to think back at the things that happen and the characters that are presented and the themes that are presented, and be able to recall those things and use them when they write their essays. Just like in English language, they have to use their subject words accurately. And there is also a spelling, punctuation and grammar mark in English literature too. They will be tested for spelling, punctuation and grammar in the An Inspector Calls question. So here are the things we are doing. In class, we are currently revising all the key texts for literature, revising the key terms to do with language, structure and form, and making revision resources which we'll be able to use. Annotating extracts and identifying techniques, reading, discussing and interpreting texts. Completing timed essays and learning from targets. And the teachers will be demonstrating how to write good answers. We'll also be playing revision games like Taboo and quizzes. Teachers are setting assignments on teams which focus on exam skills, and they are also putting revision resources on teams. Here are some of the things you can do at home. Of course, you can't beat rereading a text. We've got A Christmas Carol, Macbeth and An Inspector Calls. Just 3 texts. Obviously, if you're reading a script, it can be quite fun, much more fun, to read as a group. So why not get together with a few friends and read some of the scripts, some bits of the scripts together? Other things you can do, and I do believe in active revision, you can make yourself collages of maybe themes and characters and quotes, posters, and mind maps to think about different ideas and themes in the text. The key about revision is that it's not just reading and highlighting things. The most important thing is to transfer the information from one format to another. And it's the thinking through how you're going to do that that actually makes the revision stick in your mind. Another really good way of revising is to teach someone else. Perhaps you could follow your parents around and teach them all your GCSE English literature. I always believe in cue cards and keyword games. I think having cards to hand with some of the most important words that are going to come up in your subject are really, really good, especially during revision times. You can just whip the cards out and play a quick game with your friends. And it's those little and often that's really important. I always endorse having a revision party. I think that's a really good idea. Get together and work together. It's much more fun and it will probably stick better too. Now, obviously, there are many, many revision guides that you can buy. Lots of people buy them. But the important thing is actually using them. They're only any good if you're going to open them and use them. They're very good if you want to read alongside a text. So, for example, if you're reading An Inspector Calls, maybe reads the first few pages of the first act and then have a look at the revision guide and see what that has to say. Then take the two things together, the two texts, the guide and the actual text itself, and make a poster out of some of the key ideas that you've got. The important thing is that you're doing things with the texts. You're using them, you're turning them into something else. Now, of course, these days, you've also got loads of really good resources on the internet. I know that teachers have been setting some of your revision work on Seneca, which is a free website where you can actually go through all sorts of courses on all of the set texts. So have a look, see what you can find. There are so many things that you can find these days which will help you with your revision. I like YouTube. I use it quite a lot myself. I think when you're using YouTube, you're going to find lessons on everything. You'll find lessons on Inspector Calls, you'll find lessons on Macbeth, and you'll find plenty of lessons on A Christmas Carol as well. But again, don't just watch these lessons or you'll find you'll zone out. The important thing is to, as you're watching them, treat them a bit like lectures. Make notes and mind maps as you watch and learn, and then bring your information into class and use it in your practice essays. Of course, when you're doing English literature, there are films of everything. There are plenty of different versions of Macbeth that you can watch. There are also some very good versions of an Inspector Calls. I know there's a full BBC version on YouTube that's free. And of course, you'll find plenty of different film versions of A Christmas Carol too. So, just to sum everything up, we're planning a 2-year course and we've covered the requirements of the GCSEs. We're making sure that the lessons that we teach are fully tailored to the children's needs and making sure that they have plenty of work to do when it comes to home learning and revision. Children do get regular written feedback and they get told what they need to do personally to improve. And if they need extra support, we will certainly support them. Now, of course, this is a partnership, and so what do we want the students to do? Obviously, attend lessons, which is very important, behave well when they're there, and complete tasks to the very best of their ability. Likewise, complete home learning tasks to a good standard. Be proud of what they're doing. I think at this stage, they should certainly be doing regular short revision episodes, maybe do some research, maybe watch some YouTube lessons, make some posters, plenty of reading, fiction and non-fiction, and wider critical reading and research. What parents can do? Encourage students to attend lessons and work hard. Ensure that home learning is completed with careful thought and pride. Encourage them to check writing for paragraphing, punctuation and accuracy. And encourage plenty of reading. Have fiction and non-fiction texts around the house. And get your child to read and discuss these. The important message I think to leave you with is to start now. Little and often is key. I hope you found that a useful presentation. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to drop me a line here at school or drop your teacher a line. We're here to help you and we want you to do well.